And as Neville Garter used to say, that our thoughts and energy today are results of our thoughts and our energy of yesterday. Imagine if we were completely conscious that the life that we're living is the one that we have been creating.
Podcast Junkies, episode 368. Welcome back. I'm your host, Harry Duran. If you are new to the show, it's the one where we search out interesting voices in the world of podcasting, get them to kick back their heels and talk about their show, and sometimes more importantly, whatever else is on their mind or what's going on in their lives. I've always wanted to have a peek behind the mic, as it were. I was inspired by that show, which might date me if I mention it, inside the Actors Studio way back in the 90s. And I loved how actors would be relaxed and just be able to talk about other stuff besides acting in the movie, which I thought was refreshing. And if you are a regular viewer and listener to the show, welcome back. And thank you for everything you do to support the show, whether it's here on YouTube or across the Spotify, Apple, all the audio channels, all the podcast listening apps. I really appreciate what you do. Please continue to spread the word. It's one of the best ways to grow the show. I realize it's a bit meta, a podcast about podcasting, but it's something I've been passionate about since starting the show way back in 2014. In case you missed last episode, I spoke to Danny Pena on the show for a third time. He came back to explore his 20-year journey in podcasting and gaming. He's the founder of Gamertag Radio, the first gaming podcast to reach 1,000 episodes. With 2 decades of experience in the industry, Danny has become a respected voice and a consultant in the field, and we dove into his journey from the early days of podcasting to his current role as a media consultant, playing Xbox along Bill Gates, which is a pretty crazy story. We also discussed the evolution of the gaming industry, the impact of podcasting on his career, and how he's adapted to changes in tech and audience preferences. So please check that out if you haven't done so already. He's been a longtime supporter and a friend of the show, and I love sharing his stories. This week, I'm thrilled to welcome Rocío Pérez. She's the Chief Leadership Officer at Virtuous, and she shares her inspiring journey of transformation from being a teenage mother with a 6th grade education to becoming a successful entrepreneur and leadership coach. We discuss her experience with a brain tumor diagnosis at 34, which led her to San Diego to find herself and confront unacknowledged trauma. It's a crazy, crazy inspiring story, and it's a testament to the power of intuition, perseverance, and self-belief. We dive into Rocío's creation of the Mindshift game, a tool designed to help people build neural pathways and transform their lives. And she explains how her personal experiences and learning from various modalities contributed to the game's development. We also talk about her current projects, including a TV show, the podcast, and university courses. She's really got her plate full, and she's succeeding on all fronts. I love her insights on personal growth, authenticity, and the importance of putting yourself first. And here are 5 takeaways that I want you to listen out for. Number 1, cultivate your intuitive wisdom. Rocío credits her success to staying connected with her inner guidance from a young age. 2, challenge limiting beliefs about your potential. Despite difficult circumstances, Rocío refused to accept others' low expectations for her future. 3, use gamification to make personal growth fun. Rocío created the Mindshift game to make transformation more engaging. 4, prioritize authenticity over perfection. Rocío learned to embrace her humanity on camera rather than striving for flawless delivery. And 5, set public goals to increase accountability. By stating her 12-month goals for international expansion on the podcast, she created external pressure to follow through. Very inspiring. I know you're going to enjoy this episode, and if you do and you love it, leave a rating and a review at podcastjunkies.com/love. Nothing would please me more than to read one of these out on a future episode. We always cover a lot of ground on the show, and the episodes are full of great takeaways. And as a listener, I want you to focus all your energy on our conversation. So rest assured, you can always visit podcastjunkies.com to read the full show notes for each episode, which includes all guest links as well. And if you haven't done so already, you probably noticed the subscribe button below. So please do that. Subscribe so you can be notified when you have new episodes available for you to watch. Okay, let's get into this inspiring conversation with Rocío. So Rocío Pérez, Chief Leadership Officer at Virtuous. Thank you so much for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been some time. I'm really inspired to be here today.
So we've had a couple of back and forths trying to get this scheduled, such as the life of an entrepreneur and a podcaster.
So true. Sometimes it takes the moment.
Yeah. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from California today.
Okay. You live in Colorado, though, right?
I do. I split my time between California and Colorado.
Okay. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up all over the place. Let's just put it that way. Originally from Texas, grew up in
Okay.
Denver, and I'm still growing up right now. So
Okay. What do you consider home?
I consider home, it's interesting. I consider home definitely Denver's been home. I was recently in Texas. I was just there last week,
Okay.
and that was very homey, feel like.
Yeah.
I had been there in a long time.
Which is the location where you felt like you experienced the most transformation?
San Diego, California.
Really? Okay. What happened there?
San Diego, it's a fascinating story. At the age of 34, felt like I was on top of the world. At actually 33, everything was working out great. Literally, as I turned 34, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I went on to San Diego to go find myself and figure out because I knew it was not medical. I knew it had more to do with trauma and trauma that I had not transcended or even
Mm.
wanted to acknowledge. Forget transcending it. I didn't even
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to acknowledge it. So
yeah.
there's no need to go there. And so San Diego was very, very pivotal because I learned things about myself that I never even wanted to know.
Mm.
And that started on my journey of transformation.
What would you say was the impetus for you at the time? Because you said it wasn't um like it didn't seem like you felt like it was diagnosed as a medical condition. It was something internal that was happening. How did you know, or how did you have the sort of the wherewithal to know that like that's what it was? What was guiding you there?
I feel like I've always been connected to myself, and
Okay.
that was one of those things where I've had other situations in my life. Like, for instance, at 25, I was in a head-on collision. I knew it was not medical what was going to take me out, that it was mental, because I knew that the mind, intuitive wisdom, I would say,
Yeah.
has been my guiding force that says,
Mm.
hey, you know what, there's something more here. It's not, the doctors don't make a decision. They don't always know exactly what it is that's going to happen with you. And the way that I looked at it, it's like, I'm going to determine it. I'm the one who is the cause of it. I'm the one who's the solution of it. I will find a solution because my biggest thing was seeing my son. That was the greatest thing. He was going to be 19 when I was diagnosed, and I
Mm.
wanted to make sure that I was around. And
Yeah.
that's what took me on my hokey pokey journey, turning myself around and
Yeah.
finding out who I was and what was happening within me.
How far back can you recall having had this intuitive wisdom?
Mm. I probably would say age 5.
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
would be running around and I'm like, like I know I'm going to become a teacher. And I had these conversations a week ago with my uncle, and I'm like, Uncle, remember when I used to talk about it? And so he goes, yes, yes, yes. And so I've always had this vision of what life looked like and what it was. And even the things that were in front of me, I knew that the things that were in front of me were not reality. It's like I
Mm.
knew inside of me that there was something greater in the world. And so, was it a way of being, a way of understanding, a way of seeing the world, interacting with the world?
How did this sort of express itself in your life, especially if at age 5, I would imagine many of your friends or playmates weren't thinking the same way.
I would say it was more like a clash
Yeah.
with the people around me
Yeah.
because I knew something that other people didn't know. And it was definitely something very, very different because
Hmm.
people couldn't see it. They always thought I was like the oddball, the
Mm.
weirdo, the dreamer.
Yeah.
And I was the one who was inspiring my older brother to talk about his vision, what he
Mm.
wanted to become when he grew up. And I was, I feel like we all are born with that connection,
Yeah.
and that somewhere along the line we lose it because, we hear anywhere from 450 negative comments, don't do this, get out of here, don't do that,
Yeah.
as opposed to 50 positive comments a day. And I'm sure that those stats are even more alarming. We're just talking about from our parents. Can you imagine from TV, media, friends,
Sure.
school, whatever? And so I feel like I never lost connection. I was blessed not to lose the connection with myself.
Is that something you consciously cultivated or like were aware of that you needed to keep tending to it like a flame?
I feel when I became aware of it, I was 21 years old and I was actually afraid of it.
Mm.
I was afraid of it because now consciousness is coming, right? Like at a
Huh.
completely different level. And I started to observe myself and I didn't know what it meant. Nobody talked about that being a gift and
Yeah.
always being told that I was different. I didn't want to be different. And yes, it was an interesting journey to continue on and to say, hey, this is the way the world is. And, I went from I was pregnant at 14 and sixth grade education,
Hmm.
15 years old,
Yeah.
6-month-old baby,
Yeah.
knocking on the university doors, asking them to let me in.
Hmm.
And I wasn't taking no for an answer. So, like, I've always dealt with that from that perspective and saying, hey, this is just the way life is.
Who taught you not to take no for an answer?
I feel, call it universe, call it
Okay.
source, call it what you
Yeah.
will. It just never let me take no for an answer.
Hmm.
Not in something that it drove me to it. I feel like I was called to do something in this world, and that was to help people transform their lives,
Hmm.
no matter what their backgrounds were, that there's always another level.
Hmm. And so we'll get into the type of work that you're doing currently, but it seems like, I was taking a look at some of the projects you've worked on in the past, working with the Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition, and obviously some of the work you did with the consulting. Did you feel a calling, to sort of always be giving back, being in these types of roles where you can help like a bigger audience?
Some of it was out of necessity. Let's just put it that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Like one of my first jobs, I started coaching when I was 19 years old. I thought, hey, this is going to get me to through school, pay the
Mm,
bills, do whatever.
mm,
But I didn't even think it was a work study opportunity. I didn't
yeah.
even know that I would be coaching. And so I found out that I was naturally competent, and each role always led me into the next role. And I
Yeah.
would say I didn't even have the skills. Like if you were to look on paper, I didn't have the knowledge, skills, abilities to do what I did. I had the belief
Of
of what was
course.
possible.
Yeah.
And I was certain in my conviction of what was possible and probable. There was times that I was working with PhDs and MDs and presenting on national stages, and
Mm,
it was in other people's fields. Like all of my education's in business,
yeah.
right? And I'm self-taught in psychology and early childhood as well in human development. Those are bonuses. And I've also went to the School of Hard Knocks. I have a triple PhD from there.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that. I had what I call a corporate godfather, and he would always like push me to kind of do more. And I remember one time I had left and I'd come back, and he said, I got a position open up. It's for a project manager. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I can do that. No problem. I remember hanging up, and this will date me. I was in New York City. I went to Barnes and Noble and I got 3 books on project management. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to figure this out. But it's kind of speaking to that. Like I felt intuitively it's figure it outable, so I'll make it work. But sometimes you've got to just lead with your confidence in the beginning, or otherwise, you won't be given the opportunities.
Yes, and sometimes you just lead with your conviction. And I know for me to get in through university, I had a sixth grade education. Like I had completed the sixth grade,
Yeah.
and that was the completion of my work. I dabbled into part of the seventh grade, and that part that I dabbled into, I ditched. So I can't even take credit for that. Okay.
Yeah.
What I will say is like that conviction drove me, and that's what I was alluding to earlier. It's like that thing, call it source, call it
Sure.
universe. It had me going in a particular direction.
Mm,
By all reality, being realistic, there was no chance in the world that I would achieve what I achieved.
mm,
And here I was continuing to move forward. And that's what makes my heart sing to know that today I get to see the fruits of my labor and have all the way along the way to watch people's lives transform.
mm.
Parents communicating better with their children, relationships, marriages saved, businesses saved, careers created. All of that has made me, it's almost like it gives me fuel
Yeah.
for my being to continue to do what I do.
When did you first strike out on your own?
Wow, I would say I strike that on my own a very long time ago. I was an entrepreneur as a child. I actually never really found my way in corporations.
Yeah.
I felt like corporations moved too slow, the work moved too slow,
Yeah.
that the impact was now. So I've always had, I would say, as a young child and also as a young adult, I always had my side gig.
Oh, yeah.
Always had my side gig. And it was just a matter of like I had one
Yeah.
foot here, one foot here.
Yeah.
And it was just time for me completely 100% on my own was 2008. So it's been a
Okay.
moment.
What's your earliest entrepreneurial memory?
Oh my gosh. I was selling copper. Okay, I was just in Texas again.
Copper. Wow.
Copper. I literally, so I watched my brothers and mind you, we're like 5, 6, and 7, right?
Okay.
I watched them strip a wire and go sell it to the business that was down the street, right behind from where we lived. And I did the same thing. I'm like, hey, I learned how to do that. I was doing that at 5. I was cleaning houses at
Wow.
8.
Wow.
And so I've always had this yearning to go do my own thing.
Yeah.
I was marketing on my own in
Yeah.
my very young adult years. And so, yes, it's always been that thing I like to do and create.
So that
And
was
what
your
they
time. That was your time with definitive marketing?
Yes, that was my time with definitive marketing. I actually
Yeah.
had definitive marketing before I launched out fully on my own.
Yeah.
I was running that part-time, loved it. And then I also had another company by the name of Morning Dew Industries,
Okay.
which was a product invention company.
Hmm.
And it was products designed by me. And I played along since I would say tapping into my creativity my whole life.
Yeah.
And I started creating projects in 2000, or not 2000, 1996, 97 as class projects like the
Yeah.
motorized caddy, golf caddy. I
Okay.
had like an ebook that way before ebooks even
Way before.
existed.
Yeah.
Okay, way before. Like, but I feel like the universe again stopped me in my tracks and say, hey, it's not the time. I didn't give you the creativity for that. I gave it to you for something else
Hmm.
because that's when I was stopped on my tracks with the brain tumor and I was
Hmm.
full blown. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna take Spanx out of the water or whatever, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all these products that I had and they were ready and hey, it wasn't my time. And it wasn't my talent wasn't meant to be used for that.
Hmm. So then you started working at a company called Inventiva?
I did. Then I founded Inventiva. So I founded
Okay.
Inventiva. So the day, October 20th, 2009, the day after I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, I said,
Hmm.
what would I dedicate my life to?
Hmm.
What would give my life meaning? Because the doctor looked at me and said that day, October 19th, you can have a stroke and die any moment. And I said, okay.
Wow.
I'm
Wow.
like 34 years old, newly 34. I had 13 days prior turned
Wow.
34. And I'm looking at him like, okay, doctor, what are my options? Like, to me, this is a business transaction. Okay. Like, normally people don't deal with things like that. I do. Differently. I'm something else.
Yeah.
Okay. My
Yeah.
grandma used to say, ay, Rocío. And so I'm like, okay, doctor, what are my options? Like, he's like, you can have a stroke and die any moment. You can go invasive, take your chances with that. You can do radiation. I'm like, okay, doctor, thank you so much. He's looking at me like, what happened to you? And I'm thinking, what hasn't happened to me? So
Huh.
that very next day, I made a decision. I said, what makes my heart sing? If I don't know how much time, first of all, like, thank you for the blessing of giving me the opportunity to raise my son because it was a long shot. When do you get
Yeah.
a 14-year-old mother to come out and raise a child? Like,
Hmm.
how do you do that? And in that time, I had just turned 15. I was pregnant at 14. I had a
Oh.
social worker who was determined to take my son away from
Oh
me.
my God.
And I was determined to raise my son.
Wow.
And so just that alone, I was fulfilled. I didn't think about anything else. And although there was dreams that I had accomplished, I had a dual master's, I had built a house from the ground up for my son so that
Hmm.
he can have that. I had these two businesses. I was on my way
Yeah.
and then I said, hey, you know what? What makes my heart sing is to watch people succeed. I
Hmm.
will stay in the coaching field because I thought everybody knew coaching. I'm like, everybody knows coaching. Like, come on. Like, I was so naturally competent that I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know how naturally competent I was. So that's where Inventiva was born. And Inventiva means the creation of something new, the
Hmm.
genesis. So it's very, very intentional.
What are you most proud of your time at Inventiva?
I would say the creation of this is where the mind shift game was born. This is
Okay.
where it first came up. And as I was going through my own process, I'm like, okay, how do I transform myself? Because I was in complete denial. I was like, oh my gosh, I came to San Diego. I knew it wasn't medical. And I'm like, how do I transform myself? I went to my first neurolinguistic programming
Oh, okay.
conference with a friend, and he's like, I'm using it for business. And I'm like, why does this stuff sound familiar? But I wasn't quite grasping it. I was
Yeah.
probably grasping about 70% and went on. And then I started learning from all these different people. And I developed the first, what I called leadership development game, the Mind Shift game, which ends up being a very therapeutic game that
Hmm.
allows people to build new neural pathways. I'm like, no wonder it was successful. Of course, I didn't find this out until literally somebody told me over 2 years ago. And then I had a room full of doctors who cornered me and they're like, Rocio, this is something else. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Then I finally accepted it. So that's what I'm most proud of is continuing to grow and the creation of what now is this platform that helps people on a global level.
Talk to me about the origin story for the game. Like, how does that happen? And I know games are created all the time. We grew up
Hmm.
with games. I grew up with Monopoly and Life and Shoots Ladders and all this stuff, and even some of like, the more complicated games that require strategy. Where did you draw influences from, and how do you get the spark that this concept that you have could be a game?
I wanted to make it fun. So, first and foremost, it was during my time in San Diego
Okay.
when I was going to conferences and learning. Okay, so there's the NLP conference that I took multiple times, and the more times I took it, I learned something more. And then I felt it was important for me to transform myself into going from high thriving survival mode, which a lot of entrepreneurs are in, just FYI,
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, and to going into passion mode, doing it from a place of calm. I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to, even if we don't think we're trying to prove something, sometimes we're trying to prove something. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is the entrepreneurial mindset. And going from there, I transformed myself. I started developing modalities that took me from, I didn't know, like the first day, Harry, that I slept 6 hours, I thought I was cheating the world. I
Wow.
thought my life was a waste because the most I probably slept was 5 hours. Like for 30 plus years,
Wow.
I slept 5 hours a night. And then all of a sudden, most of the time it was like 3 and 4. I was lucky to get 5. And then all of a sudden I'm in San Diego and I'm like, oh, my life has no meaning, right? Because I don't know what to do. So taking myself from like, there's a huge carrot that I have to run after to like, I get to create from where I'm at,
Yeah.
transforming myself, learning different modalities, creating modalities. I've had psychologists like, Rocio, you created your own modalities because you didn't find anything. And I did. I created my own modalities. And that's where the game was birthed.
Hmm.
First, it was for me. It wasn't like I didn't set off to go build a game,
Yeah.
okay, by any stretch of the imagination. I was like, Rocio, I get up, I have rituals, I started alkalizing because of the physical manifestation of the brain tumor and so forth, and all the things that happen. I learned the power of affirmation, although I had been affirming my whole life,
Yeah.
although I had been visualizing my whole life. Now I had to go backwards and dissect everything I had been doing.
Hmm.
And then it worked on me, and I was shifting the way that I was thinking, how I was feeling. Like I never heard my parents give me any accolades or recognition of any form. And I'm like, okay, Rocio, you need to give yourself recognition.
Yeah.
What does it feel like? So I'd be walking by a mirror first. I was like doing the mirror work, and I'm like, hey, little girl, you're amazing. And then I walk by this mirror or windows, and I'm like, hey, little girl, you're amazing. So I started doing all these things for myself.
Love
And
that.
I had already been doing that with my clients. I'm like, you didn't hear that you were special from your father? Why don't you tell yourself that you're? And I'm like, hey, I'm telling them they're having the success that I want, but it wasn't the same
Yeah.
success, right? Because they wanted what I had
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I wanted what they had.
That's funny.
And
Yeah.
for me, it was the funniest thing. So that's where it was born. I became completely obsessed with it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, how do I gamify it to make it fun? Because it takes something.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to transform yourself and to start creating new neural pathways and go through a journey that you don't know what it's like. It's going to drag you. It's going
Mm.
to bring you to your knees. It's going to
Hmm.
make you pray that you didn't meet it sometimes.
That's funny.
And at times it's gonna surprise you,
Yeah.
right? And especially depending on where we're and that's what it did for me because I was avoiding it for so long.
Mm.
The sooner that we do that, the easier the process is. It's not
Yeah.
gonna drag you then, but if you deny it like I did, let me tell you, it wasn't pretty.
Hmm.
So that's where it was born. I wanted to gamify it. I wanted to make it fun. I wanted to make it exciting for people. And it has because now it's a game that you play. You're the one who sets the parameters. You decide what it is that you're playing to win for. Are you playing to become a speaker? Are you playing to become a presenter? Are you playing to be an accountant or, football player? What is your game?
Sure.
And you get to measure your success based on your efforts, not somebody else's efforts.
Did you grow up playing a lot of games?
In my mind, I played a lot of games in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, because there's probably like guidelines on how to create this sort of stuff. And it sounds like a lot of this you made up along the way. And that's probably what made it so unique.
Mhm. I did. I made it up along the way, and
Yeah.
now looking at it, dissecting it with psychologists, it's like, oh, it ends up being a cognitive behavioral therapy tool. You know, it's got some somatic therapy
That's funny.
modalities in there, and I'm like, oh, interesting. No wonder it works.
Who would you say that the game is for?
The game is for anyone. Like, I believe that every parent, teacher, leader, educator, needs to have it. I think it's
Okay.
important for them to have it because it's such a subtle way to challenge yourself and create those new neural pathways that you can do in
Hmm.
the privacy of your own time, right? Nobody needs to know. You don't need to follow somebody else's journey. You follow your own journey. We are all born with our own intuitive wisdom. So,
Hmm.
what the things that I don't apply to you and vice versa, and to the 7 billion people in the world,
Sure.
there's a magic combination for each of us and
Yeah.
it's up to us to discover what it is.
And do you need a minimum of at least two players?
Nope.
Just one?
One player. You can literally, like, everyone has their own game,
Okay.
and you can literally have your own game for yourself. You can play in a group of 20 people with everybody having their own game. Nobody ever even needs to know what you wrote down.
Hmm.
You can simply just share your achievements if you choose to. And we've had people play at all different levels. Like there was people who wanted to level up, who wanted to become entrepreneurs, get a higher paying job. For some people, their challenge was to go hike up a mountain, a
Okay.
14er and above. And for other people was driving across the country. So everybody has their own thing that they're working on that they may not be publicly saying, hey, this is what they may have some shame or the reservation or not want to be vulnerable, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That's what it's built for. I did my work in my own privacy at my own home, and nobody
Okay.
needed to know what I was doing,
Okay. Well, yeah,
although I shared the results.
we'll make sure we have a link to that because I know people will be curious to learn more about it.
Mhm.
When did you feel that it was time to wrap up Inventiva and start new with Virtuous?
I felt that in December of 23. I said, okay, this is time for me to go ahead and fully jump into this. I was running both Inventiva and Virtuous part-time, more on the creation for Virtuous. And I said, okay, now it's time. It's time to take it to a completely different level. It needs its own platform. And Virtuous by itself is being virtuous
Hmm.
and veering, being at the captain. You're the captain of your ship.
Yeah.
You're the screenwriter, you're the director, you are the creator. And as Neville Garter used to say, that our thoughts and energy today are results of our thoughts and our energy of yesterday.
Mm.
Imagine if we were completely conscious that the life that we're living is the one that we have been creating. We just don't know we've been creating that life all along. And that's one
Mm.
thing that I'm very certain about that. And I feel like that's what allowed me to survive the car accident,
Yeah.
not be in a wheelchair, and also what allowed me to be here before you 15 years later.
Oh, that's a great story. So Virtuous is really all around looking at the Mind Shift brand and just seeing now what else can become of it. You've got the game itself. I saw a reference to a game show, and obviously we'll get into the podcast as well.
Yes, yes, everything that we do. We even have a university. The university allows people, there's three separate course levels, and you get to decide, do I understand fear? How does fear work? What is imposter syndrome? How
Hmm.
does it work? We
Hmm.
go into level number two, understanding ourselves deeper. How do I self-sabotage? How do I move throughout all these different things? And then we come into psychological safety and change management, critical conversations, all those things that are important.
Yeah.
The TV show gives tips. I interview people. Sometimes I'm solo, and most of the time I have guests that are bringing their own unique insights, leadership insights on things of how they have self-sabotage, the things that they hadn't seen before, and anywhere from unconscious bias that we all have. How do we have that fear of judgment? We don't want to
Yeah.
judge, but you know what? It's human nature. We can't go against what our human nature is. Can we decipher? Yes, we can. And then, of course, the podcast and the TV show, they go hand in hand. Sometimes we have the same guest on both of them with different takes, different
Hmm.
interviews on there.
When did you come up with the idea for the podcast?
Well, I came up with the idea for the podcast 2 years ago. Okay,
Okay.
I've been wanting to do a podcast for a long time. I actually took action 2 years ago, and
Yeah.
I started recording
Okay.
and recording and recording, and it was too much. Let me
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
say, it was a lot to do. Think about like the TV show. I had just launched a TV show. I had to launch the game. I was launching the university,
Wow.
working on all those pieces, and I said, okay, let me just go ahead and record and record, record. So what we're seeing, a lot of it is like these amazing golden nuggets from people all over the world who are sharing how they got to where they got to.
So how would you distinguish the difference between what you're doing with the TV show and how is, maybe talk a little bit how that's produced, how that's distributed and how you differentiate that from like the podcast?
Most definitely. So the TV show, it's more of a longer interview, and those range anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the person that's on there. The and it we provide, what are the tips that made this person what they do? How do they move forward? It's typically anywhere from 3 to 5 different questions. The podcast is very focused. So the person may take a specific topic and just say, okay, here for the next 5 or 10 minutes, this is what we're going to talk about. It's meant to be more digestible, a lot easier. Somebody's going to walk into a meeting and I need to drive, and all of a sudden, I'm like feeling anxious. How do I
Mm.
have some tips that I can easily implement without listening to the podcast for the next, or the TV show for the next hour or
Yeah,
so?
yeah.
Let me get some quick insights. And that was the major difference between those two.
Is everything on YouTube?
No,
Okay.
everything for the most part from the podcast and the tips are on YouTube. What we have is on a platform, the TV show is on Expand TV. It's
Okay.
the Netflix of the coaching world.
Okay.
And it is a membership site where people buy into it, and they have anywhere from like mental health and
Mm.
education and children and so forth. So people can dabble in whatever it is that they want to learn more about and pick and choose.
It's almost like Gaia is for spirituality, what Expandi is for
And for
like
the coaching world, that's
coaching world.
right.
Okay.
That is, and it's amazing. Camille Garrett is an extraordinary producer and a good friend of mine, and pretty amazing in what she thought of how to bring people together and share insights where somebody may want to do some deeper work. And my invitation's always like, yes, this is a great opportunity to get exposure and learn something, but also it's important to do the actual work, because that could only be done on an individual or group basis.
What's the domain for the network? Expandi?
Expand I
Okay.
TV.
Okay. And so they all the content for the Mindshift TV show is just exclusively available on Expandi.
Correct. All the
Okay.
content is
Okay.
exclusively available there.
And then for what you're doing on YouTube, I saw that you have the content on YouTube. Are you also making it available on the audio channels like Spotify and Apple?
Not yet.
Okay.
That's our next level.
Okay. Yeah, so it's important to make sure because from a distribution perspective, I saw that you did have the content there set up as the podcast, but the Apple and Spotify will give you that visibility because, there people are now searching when they search for podcast related stuff. They're going into Apple and looking for like, I need help with this, and or they're going to Spotify. So what you want to do is just set up your podcast host, and we use Captivate, which is they allow for dynamic ad insertion, which is helpful. So you can
Mm-hmm.
later on, if you want to do promos, you can cycle them in, cycle them out. But essentially, your podcast host, like Captivate, is where your physical MP3s reside. And then you're
Okay.
giving the RSS feed, which is a URL, you're giving that to Apple and saying, I have a podcast. Here's where I host it. And then all you do
Hmm.
every time is like when you publish your content on YouTube, you put the audio version on Apple, and then it's available. It shows up you put it on Captivate, and then within minutes, it's available in Apple Podcasts. Now, Spotify is a little
Perfect.
interesting because they're trying to compete with YouTube now. So Spotify started as audio. So obviously, you would go into Spotify for creators and say, I have a new show. Here's my RSS feed from Captivate. And then Spotify recognizes that. And then every time you publish in Captivate, same thing, it'll publish. But what Spotify is doing now is saying, oh, by the way, if you have video, you can upload the video into Spotify.
Oh,
so
okay.
now, if you've ever noticed on some shows on Spotify, they have video, you can
Mm.
upload, if you've already making video content on YouTube, you can upload it to Spotify. So there's a whole workflow for that, obviously, for getting it uploaded. But what happens is it replaces whatever audio you had on there, and technically the video version becomes your video and your audio version on Spotify going forward. So
Oh, that's perfect. That's great to
yeah,
know.
yeah. And so there's a lot of moving parts, but what it does, it gives you that visibility. And then what you do, and I didn't look too much into the YouTube side, but what we guide clients with was when we create shows to remember that the title of a podcast episode is very SEO friendly. So the more you can make it almost prescriptive in the title,
Hmm.
even if it's a bit wordy, people SEO picks that up, but it's also people are looking now for episodes to solve specific pain points, right? How
Hmm.
do I, like, I'm working through a challenging conversation with my boss, or I need to get ready for a job interview. Like, you'll start to see these titles that literally say that thing in there because people are looking for that help. And so, one of the first exercises we take new clients through is to title your first 12 episodes. And it helps you think about what content would I create with this title in mind? So it's that's a pure pen and paper exercise, right? But it's just
I
it
love
helps you
it.
really think. And even if you're creating future content, like title it first, because then it'll help you think, who do I invite to talk about this topic, or how do I teach on this topic?
Mm. That's great. Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing that. I'm
yeah,
excited to go through that exercise with my
yeah.
team.
What's been your experience since you started the show? Did you have someone to look to for in terms of like how you host a show or how you interview people?
Mm. I actually took my experience from the TV show,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's how that's what I used to interview people and hosting them. We did have an intern that helped us as well, who took it on as a class project
Okay.
and to help us do some of the setup, and then our team finished up the work on the internally.
What did you learn on the TV show side that helped prepare you for having interviews?
Well, lighting, timing, making sure that you can take breaks in between costume change, no, costume changes,
Set change.
questions, people freezing in the middle
Yeah.
of an interview, the editing, the things that may not go along with the brand.
Mm,
And, one of those things, I think the major thing that I learned too is that it's better to do pre-record so that way we
mm,
have the opportunity to edit things.
yeah.
So once it goes live, you can't take it out. You can't take it out, right?
You got to
And
you got to
so
take the video down if you have to. Yeah.
you've got to take the whole video down, and
Yeah.
hopefully nobody watched it, but I'm sure there's going to be eyes on it.
Sure.
And so for some of those interviews, I actually ended up pulling interviews that I said, this is not in alignment with our brand. We
Mm,
won't air this. So those are some of the major learnings. I think the timing was the biggest thing, keeping it there and preparing the audience too, because sometimes audience could, I don't know, sometimes we're dysregulated and we don't even know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Of
so
course.
we're showing up in inappropriate settings and clothing and lighting and all of the above. I heard it all. I've heard a lot of things. And I'm sure there's a lot more to hear. Really knowing that there's a system for it. There's a
Yeah,
system. There's a reason why you have a microphone in front of you. There's a reason why you have the proper lighting, why it's quiet. There's a reason why you don't schedule, like for me, there's a reason why I don't schedule around people's lunchtime
yeah.
because they're not happy campers. I'm between them and their next meal,
Of
and I'm not
course.
winning. Okay.
Yeah.
So the content that I'm going to get is not as good as it is after they eat.
Yeah, it's always you always have to be conscious of their mind state, but also your own too. Where's your energy level
Mhm.
at? And I've made the mistake sometimes of having like back to backs. Like I have an interview after this one, but those are the only two for the day. But there's been days when I'll see the interview and I'm just like I've had a full back to back meeting day, and I know that I'm drained. And so I'll reach out and I'll say, "Hey, can we reschedule? Because I just want to come up, I want to be present with all of my attention and energy and focus. And right now I'm feeling a little depleted. So I think I'm always conscious of the experience of the listener as well and the viewer, right? Because I want to
Yes.
deliver like a great experience for them as well.
And it is an experience that you're delivering. I had to do that for the first time after I've probably done 500 interviews so
Hmm,
far, total within my career in
sure.
podcast and TV and all of that. And I had to tell somebody who was like a super high level person, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I'm sick. Like,
Yeah.
can I pull through it? Yes.
Yeah.
Will it be my best delivery? No, it won't because I'm not fully present
Sure.
and I'm not going to be able to guide the conversation and contribute to the conversation as I would if I was feeling good.
Yeah. So how have you grown as a host in terms of your interview skills when you look back at who Rocio was with those first few interviews and now like where you are now?
I would say I'm much more confident. Before I was like, I was afraid I was going to be making mistakes. And I'm like, did I say that right? Did my enunciation come out? Did I
Yeah.
articulate that the way I was in my head? And also coming from the voice world, I've done a lot of voice work for TV commercials and
Okay.
websites and so forth. And video. And here I was, now I was on camera. There's no editor
Yeah.
in front of me that I can say, hey, can we just like strike that one out? Although we definitely went through the videos, and I would say that with time in the beginning, I would say, okay, edit this, edit from, I don't know, 1.9
Timestamps. Yeah.
to timestamps to 1.11 or whatever. Now I'm flowing through the interviews, and some of the things are not that important, right?
Yeah.
You get to see my humanity. Did I sneeze? Okay, I sneezed. Did
Sure.
I have to like wipe my nose? I'm human,
Yeah.
right?
Take a
Hey,
drink of
people,
water.
yeah, did I need to take a drink of water? Did I need to do something to adjust my seat? Because I did have to do that last week. I'm like, okay, I just need to move myself around. So all of that, taking that into consideration and saying, hey, this is humanity. It's good. People enjoy the authenticity versus the perfection. Perfection doesn't
Oh yeah.
always make it to the plate. Authenticity does. People can relate to it. They've been there, they've done that, they've seen that.
Yeah, and speaking for myself as a child of the 80s, like we were fed like these clips of like, 2-minute sound bites, and the longest interviews you would see would be on something like maybe 60 minutes or 2020 or something
Hmm.
like, finally like more like maybe 15, 20 minutes. But now we're realizing like if you want to have a genuine conversation with someone and, shows like 3 hour shows like Joe Rogan, like where you sit there and you're like, after 3 hours, you get to kind of know what a person's really like, and
Yeah.
you can't really BS, you have to actually say something meaningful at some point if you want to be taken seriously. And I think what we're learning now is like just giving people time to breathe and share stories and be genuine. It's a skill, and I'm grateful that I feel like I'll be an eternal student of like interviews to just learn and practice from people that I see and admire and just continue to expand my craft.
And keeping things new, I would say that would be the other thing that I did learn because it's like, okay, we can sound like a broken record, tell the same story over and over again.
Yeah.
You can tell the same story with a different take on it, right? That it could be shorter, it could be just to make an impact, to make a point, to do whatever. And the more I tell like different stories, like being there, that's what I've learned throughout my podcasting TV career.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it seems like, from the moment we started the conversation, the whole topic has been how much your life is transformed and how you responded to that transformation. So, if people are asking you, like, seeing the course of your life and everything you've been to and the ups and downs and how you've needed to sort of continuously reinvent yourself, how would you describe transformation to someone, that's watching you from the outside? Like, what's that experience like for you personally?
Well, I'd say like, first of all, I was perfectly perfect
Of course.
on the outside.
Yeah.
On the inside, I was in denial. And so I think it was a shock for some people when, as I was transforming and seeing myself through a different lens, one of the things that I recognized for myself is that I was fawning. I wanted to make people feel great. That first
Mm,
conference, that
mm,
that neurolinguistic conference that I talked about with my friend, his girlfriend went along, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're so amazing!" I'm like, "Rocío, you're more educated than she is, right? You have achieved more. Why are you giving accolades where
yeah.
there?" And not that I was seeking any of that. I was just in a way in an eternal fawning state. And then when I
Mm,
stopped fawning, people were
yeah.
they were concerned. They're like, why? Why? You would do any favor for me. And I'm like, no, I'm putting myself first.
Yeah.
Like today I'm
Yeah.
going to sleep. I'm sorry, I know you're sick, and I just want to call and say good night because
Mm,
I know that I come first,
yeah.
right? I'm no good if I'm like completely dysregulated in the case of an emergency or even in running my life on a daily basis. So seeing people who in the end saw me like that, they're like, oh, yeah, I'll make some friends, and
Yeah.
some will leave because they were friends for that time, and maybe we'll connect sometime in the
Sure.
future.
Yeah.
But
Like
my
you
life
usually
is about
say,
growth.
yeah, friends come by or come into your life for a reason, a
These
season, or a lifetime. Yeah. Or
and
multiple lifetimes if you believe in that as well, too.
right, that as well. And so when we see them, we're like, "Wait, I know you. You look familiar.
We've met before.
We've met before." So,
So when you think about where you're at and you've got the TV show and you've got the podcast, if we're having this conversation 12 months from now, like a year from now, what would need to happen for you to look back and be satisfied with your progress?
wow. In general, to be satisfied, we would be fully in the Latin American country.
Mm,
Latin American countries where bilingual, so we're bringing that out into that world, and then be in Canada, and of course, our work is being more intensely
yeah.
delivered there. And then, of course, it's heard and seen all over the world. And right now, those two places, I would say, in the next 12 months, you come knocking, they'll see it's 12
Yeah.
months later. What are your results? I'm like, okay, I've been to Mexico 23 times. I've been to Canada another
Yeah.
40 times. And
Yeah.
here's what our results are.
That's awesome. I'll put a reminder in to hit you up.
Okay, please put a reminder because we now we have social proof.
It's
I better
public.
make this happen.
Yeah.
It's public. So
Yeah.
the likelihood that it's actually going to happen, it's 95% because I'm going
Yeah.
to push myself to make sure
Yeah.
it's out there.
Awesome. Just a couple of questions as we wrap up that I like to end with. What is something you've changed your mind about recently?
I would say the way that I view the world, like I had a whole view of how my family was in the past. Like I
Mm,
had this image of a child, like there's certain things that are perfection. And after spending time with my family,
yeah.
I realized I'm like, oh, and I hadn't seen you in a long time. I could see patterns. And that's one thing that I changed my mind about. I'm like, I could see patterns.
That's funny. What is the most misunderstood thing about you?
Mm. That I show up as a queen. Like my friends are always, I'm like, you're like royalty. You always show up like a queen. And I feel like the thing that was misunderstood was prior to my transformation that I did show up perfect because perfect was protection.
Oh, That
And
makes a lot
now
of
it's like,
sense.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I went to Quinceañera over the weekend and I'm like, I don't know if I have time to shave my legs. Is it going to matter? I don't care.
Yeah.
There's points in my life now that I don't have to be matchy-matchy,
Yeah.
perfect. I don't have to be eloquent in the way that I speak. I'm just going to speak from my heart, from my
That's a
humanity.
that's a beautiful ribbon to put on this conversation. Thank you for sharing that, and thanks for connecting with me and being so vulnerable about your story, because I think it just shows the listener and the viewer like the power of perseverance and being clear about what you stand for and what you want to achieve in life. And I get the sense from this conversation that's been clear for you, that North Star, and it's been what's constantly moving you forward and continues to move you forward. You don't let yourself be defined by what other people's preconceived notions are about your health or where you're going to end up. It's been really inspiring to hear that. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with my audience.
Thank you so much. I so much that I fired my doctor, so we should send them a
Yeah, well,
message on here.
sounds,
We'll send them the podcast. But thank you so much, Harry. This is quite an honor, privilege, fun. Thank you for what you bring and how you help podcasters and people bring their podcast to life
yes.
and making their life easier.
Yeah, helping them find their voice, as I like to say.
Yes.
What's the best place for folks to connect with you to learn more?
They can definitely connect with us. They can call me directly at 303-587-8367.
Okay.
They can look at us at the mindshiftgame.com. They can also find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. We're on those platforms.
Yeah, and we put all those links in the show notes as well for the
Perfect.
listener. Thanks for your time, Rocio. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.